comes to the film The Bikeriders, I'm going to be completely honest and say it was an okay film. Now before we get into all that, let's talk about the positives. Firstly, I will say there was a lot of good performances in this film, the acting was really well done, but I will be honest, it was nothing extravagant or outstanding performances in this film. It was just a really good, enjoyable experience. Now when it comes to the violence in this film, I will say it was really enjoyable, especially as the violence scenes are somewhat scattered around, and it really kept you as an audience member on your toes, learning about what the type of people these characters are, and really just learning about what type of actions they would take when being disrespected or insulted by others. The soundtrack in this film is really good as well, really adding to the setting, make it seem more convincing, as well as that just adding a great more deal to the atmosphere of the film. When it comes to the characters of this film, I will say a lot of them were quite intriguing. The most intriguing one of all was Johnny, the leader of the group, as he was quite a tough but fair leader towards his crew members, and whilst from an outsider looking in, you may perceive the gang and him as quite savagery and scary, but actually he's quite a kind person to an extent, especially when it comes to women, which we see a glimpse of in the early parts of the film, but especially later towards the end as well. Now, this film does explore some themes. The one that I noticed quite early on is the theme of influence, as we see Johnny getting the idea of being in a bike gang or leader of a biker gang. It's when he watches the film Easy Rider, and it's just intriguing that he got this one idea from a film and somewhat created a community influencing a whole bunch of people, but then he unwillingly influenced the younger generation to do the same, but lacking any of the moral code he seems to possess. And that leads on to the next theme, which is the theme of don't meet your heroes, as the younger generation he influenced approach him about possibly joining his gang at the worst possible time and get quite a disappointing response, which was in the form of a lesson about loyalty, which was just badly represented, and this meeting would end up being the downfall of Johnny. Now, the ending of this film is actually quite sad, as we see the biker gang, which didn't really get involved in criminal activity, becoming quite criminal-like, at least what we're hearing from the narration. And then when it comes to the members, a lot of them stayed the gang out of fear, some fled, and some met their demise. And then we go back to Benny, who left earlier, and we see that he has somewhat left the motorcycle gang and he has moved on from that life, or at least we believe that, as we see him outside and he hears the sound of a motorcycle engine, and it somewhat brings a smile towards his face, showing that he's not quite fully done with that life. He still has good memories of it. Now when it comes to this film, I will be honest, there are a few things to criticise. Firstly, I felt like it lacked a lot of interest. Now, this is due to part my own fault, as I misinterpreted what the film was actually about. I assumed it would be about the rival gang to the Hells Angels, and seeing somewhat a slightly David versus Goliath type of thing, of where this rival gang takes on what was at the time one of the biggest and scariest biker gangs of the USA, that being Hells Angels. Sad to say, that is not what this film is about in its entirety, and so I got that wrong, and I'll happily take the blame for that, for having higher ideas than it actually is. But I feel like this film lacks any real direction, as it's supposedly a story about the downfall of a particular gang, yet we don't really see much infighting throughout this film, at least not until the last 10 minutes, but even that is minuscule or minimum at best. And then we see one of the main people leaving the gang, even though he was so loyal to them. Even when getting injured, he stuck by the gang, but this one thing he was asked to do was too far for him and decides to leave, and it didn't really make sense. And then there was a lot of gaps they jumped from, and so I feel like we're missing a lot of detail which would have led and had a bit more of an understanding as to why this gang got to where it was. And then my other critique about this film is its lack of exploring themes. The most pivotal scene in this film is where the gang retaliate towards a bar that allowed Benny to be beaten up severely, and they retaliate. But they get retribution by burning the bar to the ground. And Johnny sees the power he has when, as the bar is burning down, the fire brigade and the police are by either side and not approaching them whatsoever, as they don't want to get involved. And he realises the power he has, and then the film completely abandons what really could have been a hooking and an interesting narrative of seeing Johnny being hooked on that power, but they don't do anything about it. And I just thought they're missing what could have been a really hooking story, but no, they just threw water on it and moved on, which just felt so disappointing. Overall, I've got to be honest, I'll say the film is a decent watch, as there's some good performances from some of the actors, but at the same time it's lacking anything hooking or of replay value. So to say, is this film good? I'm going to be honest and say it's okay. Rating wise, I'm going to be nice and say 5 out of 10. Would I rewatch it? The answer is plain and simple, and it's no. I just don't think this film has anything worth rewatching, personally, if I'm being truly honest. Now when it comes to recommendations, first thing that comes to mind is, if you're looking for anything motorcycle related, Sons of Anarchy, as that has great themes to explore, great character development, amazing story, but especially the great action scenes that we get as well. Next is Goodfellas, which I do agree with some people that have said it's very similar in the way of telling in the narrative and story, but I would say Goodfellas is a far superior film. Now, Jodie Comer, one of the actors in this film, did an amazing job, but she is much better in so many other things, one of them being Killing Eve. She plays the antagonist and does a fantastic job. Not only that, but Help, a movie about a nurse in a retirement home during the COVID pandemic, and I think she did a great job. Not only her, but Stephen Graham did amazing performances. Definitely give it a watch. Austin Butler, as great as he was in this, I still see him as Elvis Presley, which I think again is probably one of his best roles. He's going to be haunted by that for a few years. And lastly, Tom Hardy, who most would know as Venom or as Bane in Dark Knight Rises, but I saw him in a film which is quite dark and twisted, but a really great performance, and that is the film of Bronson, based on the criminal who went by the name Charles Bronson after the actor. It is a dark and twisted, sadistic film, but the performance alone is worth the watch. I think it's like a bucket list movie, you have to watch it at least once. Those are my recommendations. This has been my review for the film The Bikeriders. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed, please like and subscribe, but most importantly, thank you and have a nice day.